All right, so a look here at the swing of Camilo, and this is taken from the Canadian Open, the Pro-Am Day of 2024. Context is he's hitting a fairway wood off the tee, so we got to bear that in mind when we're talking or discussing the certain fundamentals in this golf swing, or certain aspects of this golf swing might change. For example, if he's hitting a wedge or something different, but we'll go with this swing anyway. So what we're going to do is just at the very start, we're just going to put a little circle around where his belt buckle is right there. So we could reference that very loosely as the center of the pelvis, let's say. And what we're going to also notice at the start is the intent of putting a lot of flex into that right leg. So we have this player that is pretty much sitting back into that trail side, that trail leg to start this golf swing. And as he works back, what we're going to see early on is a little bit of rotation out of that trail hip. We can see that trail pocket here start to rotate ever so slightly at the start, but that rotation doesn't last very long, so it kind of halts in and around here somewhere. And from here on out, there's a very clear intention to load into that trail leg. So you could say a lot of internal rotation of that trail hip not really rotating a whole bunch, more rotating into that right leg, that right thigh, as he moves further and further back. And we can see that belt buckle starting to move a little bit more laterally away from its origin, or where it was at setup. So as we get to top of backswing here, very defined loading away from the golf ball, which we don't really see a lot of nowadays, more the idea of staying centered. But this player has clearly defined what they want to do with the setup. So loading into the right side at the setup, the trail side, loading some more in the trail side as he goes back, creates this very kind of deep lateral position. Now, if we are that deep in terms of the lateral, so I mean when I say laterals, the side to side here, we also got to have this corresponding move in transition. And again, looking at that red little circle that we kind of established at the start of being where the center of his pelvis roughly was to start this swing, where does he get to at about halfway down? So we see this massive shift of the pelvis, this big lateral movement. Now, it's important to know when laterals happen, there's obviously the other movements. There is still rotationals, there is still verticals occurring, but there's a very dominance in lateral early in this player's action to get back down to golf ball. There is also a vertical. So this player is also moving downwards. If we're looking at the head placement as that player moves down, we can see that cap moving down as he compresses that rib cage down on top of the pelvis. So we have this very loaded right side backswing, then this very dominant lateral shift in transition, this push down on top of the pelvis. And generally speaking, from about here is where we would see the vertical start to kick the other way. So we'd nearly see that player start pushing back up out of the ground. So the fact, when I push into the ground, it pushes backwards. Not so much with this player, and we've got to understand that he's not really pushing into the ground, as more sliding along the ground. So more the force going from left to right, so to speak, rather than pushing vertically into the foot area. There is still that force being applied, but it's not the dominant force, let's say. So that lateral shift into when that lead arm gets parallel. And then from here, we see the head move further down into the golf ball as that player pushes down, goes into a significant amount of side bend to deliver this golf club. Very much that lead knee now being the brace. So we saw the trail knee be the brace in the backswing of what he wanted to do, that fixed point around which he moved. Now the lead knee, the left knee, becomes that brace, the fixed point around which he wants to move. So very much in this golf swing, you see this lateral movement early in the backswing to the right side becoming the brace, the lateral movement to the left side becoming the brace. And again, still rotationals, but very little verticals in this golf swing. Obviously a very impressive player, there's no doubt about that. And as we know from his background, very much into the physical, wants to be very strong, does a lot of cycling, nearly a professional cycler, I believe. But we see in this golf swing a very intent of how he wants to move the body, how he wants to move the golf club in the best possible way. So perhaps going against the kind of trend nowadays, which is more rotational, more fixed center point, and then having lots of verticals pushing up through impact. Nearly most players sometimes now, especially younger players, having that left foot come off the ground at impact, where we see a little bit of the opposite here, more the force being applied in a lateral direction with this player who still hits it consistently well, consistently far and consistently a good distance. And again, we can never, despite what a player does laterally, vertically, horizontally, these players on the PGA Tour, when we look at where they are the best at, is probably in and around this impact area here. We cannot argue with impact positions, as come these best players in the world. That is one of the best impact positions, again, you will find in terms of delivering that club head. So just a quick look into what Camilo does that I find interesting from my personal perspective.